Why?
She injured herself.
Doing what? Playing ice hockey?
She's almost 90. If we go get her, I'm gonna let y'all meet her because she's a hoot. Or when we go get her, I'll let y'all meet her. So.
Where's she
Yeah,
at?
she's in Henderson. All right, guys, page 100 in your textbook, 73 in the ring binder, if you like to follow along. 100 in the textbook, 73 in the ring binder. All right, so how many of you drink sweet iced tea? Okay, all right. So what if I told you, effective at noon today, you could not have sweet iced tea anymore?
I would say the devil is a
I'd
liar.
be okay.
You'd be okay?
I mean, it's not like my favorite, so I can.
So you can come up with an alternative?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your alternative? Coke?
No, any kind of juice.
Oh, okay, well, you'll be okay on the juice.
Yeah.
All right, how about soda drinkers? You got some stuff, oh yeah, you gotta have your Pepsi? All right, what if you can't have it starting noon today?
I'd have a headache.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, not only would we be emotionally frustrated, we would have physical challenges associated with decaffeinating ourselves.
Be irritated.
Yeah, because the caffeine is truly something that we get somewhat addicted to. So the reason I start off with this in chapter 11 is when you get ready to go to the nursing home, you get choices for your food. We talked on the first day about the fact that there are some residence rights, and they do have some cultural and religious rights or norms associated with what they can refuse. We use the example of the Jewish refusing pork. But for the most part, the dietary department is going to prepare 113 breakfast meals, and they're going to come out, and that is what you're going to have for breakfast. So if you wanted Krispy Kreme this morning,
Oh, you can have some.
thank you, baby, I already had 2.
I think it's like 5 what?
Really, my son got me Krispy Kreme for Mother's Day present. That was pretty sad, wasn't it?
Not really. Was
But
they
what
hot
if I-
now?
Yeah, it was nice.
See?
But
Must
if
be
that's what you had a
Welsh.
taste for, and you weren't ever going to have that again, how excited would you be about breakfast this morning? I mean, I wouldn't be excited. How many of you don't eat grits? Do not do grits. Don't do grits. If you weren't raised in the South, I was not. I was raised in California and then Illinois. I didn't come to the South until I was in high school. I didn't know what grits were.
I don't do the processed grits now,
Yeah, like the add water kind of thing.
yeah, I don't do those now.
But the thing is, it's gonna probably be on your plate several mornings a week. There's probably gonna be a biscuit on your plate several mornings a week. Sausage or bacon and eggs and the traditional things. And if those are things you don't like, you're not gonna be able to say, oh, I really would rather have had a waffle this morning. Can I get that? They're gonna say no. Today is scrambled egg day, and if you don't like it, then you don't have to eat it. We made the comment last week that would residents gain weight, maintain weight, or lose weight? We said that they will probably lose, and this is part of the reason why. The other thing is, there's no control over the setup of the plate. So some of you, and I don't want to embarrass you, make you raise your hand on this, but some of you can't stand for one food to touch the other. So the liquid from the corn better not run into the mashed potatoes, because that's disgusting. And some of you take your corn and mix it in your mashed potatoes before you eat it. So there are dietary habits that you even have that you don't realize. Some of you eat all of one item before you move to the other. So I'm gonna eat all my meat, and then all my macaroni and cheese, and then and you're gonna have a cycle to the way you do that. And now you've lost control over all of that. I am probably one of the pickiest eaters that there is. I'm very fortunate, my body has figured out how to remain somewhat healthy. I don't eat fruits and vegetables.
What?
Like, at all. Like,
How did you
at
not
all.
do that and you have kids?
I got vitamins.
Well, yeah.
But, so what's gonna happen when I get to the nursing home? Am I gonna be able to say, I don't do fruits and vegetables? Please make sure my plate is full of potatoes and pasta and meats and breads and grains and, no. They're gonna say
So-
tough.
How would they do that if a person's nonverbal, but it's on their list of foods to eat? Like, let's say they brought them out a tray and it's bacon on there, but the person doesn't like bacon,
Sure.
but they've never been able to verbally express that.
Then you got a problem, because what's gonna happen is if there's gonna be a dietary order from the physician. The physician's gonna make a decision. Can they have a regular diet? Do they have to have a diet with low sodium? Do they have to have a diet with low concentrated sugars because they're diabetic? Do they have to have a pureed diet or something that's very soft, mechanical? So the first piece of that is the doctor's made the decision for you on what your dietary is going to be. And you're right, if you're nonverbal, not only can you say you don't like it, but we want you as CNAs to eat at least 75% of what's brought out to you, because what is brought out is caloric based and nutritionally based, so that we try to maintain your weight. And so it creates tremendous challenges for these individuals when they get ready to eat. So the first thing that's changed for some of you since you've been in school, there used to be 4 food groups, there's now 6 food groups, so that's changed a little bit, and these are listed for you in your ring binder as well as on page 100 in your textbook. So we still have a category for veggies, and we have a category for fruits. That actually used to be a combined category, and it's separated out now. There's still a category for grains. We used to call that breads, but now they broadened it to include other forms of grainy substances other than bread. There is protein, which used to be called meat, and for obvious reasons, we don't call a category meat anymore, because people who choose not to eat meat know that you can get plenty of proteins from beans or other substances that are out there. We still have dairy, which is there, and then the one that's the most unusual or thinking about is oils are now a food group, because we learned that there are certain essential oils that have to be in your diet in order for certain vitamins and minerals to be able to be metabolized. So we have to have certain oils in our diet. So the dietary department is responsible for making sure that the 6 food groups are there, and then they're also responsible for ensuring that my female residents are getting about 1,600 calories a day, and our male residents are getting about 2,000 calories a day. Doesn't seem fair, but the reality is our bodies do metabolize differently. Now, those of you that have ever been on a diet, you know that most of us could lose weight on a 1,600 calorie diet. It's very common for a Weight Watchers to be in the category of a 1,200 to 1,400. And you're thinking, 1,600? No wonder that they're going to be losing weight. But also remember, they're not as mobile. They don't have the activity level that we do. Even walking, they're not going to do as much as we are. So we are burning more calories than they are. And that's considered typically a substantial amount of caloric intake to maintain their nutritional needs. And then what they'll do is they'll divide that up into categories. So they'll have a certain number of feedings of the fruit and vegetables, or servings, certain numbers of servings of protein and dairy and grains and oils to make up that caloric intake. Now maybe that wouldn't be so bad, but then there's another piece of this order. So the doctor's got you ordered for 1,600 calories, and now they've decided that you've got enough chewing and swallowing risks that they're going to modify your diet to what's called a dysphagia diet. Remember on day 1 we learned the word aphasic or aphasia, and it was one of the barriers to communication, and it had to do with their inability to speak. Well, dysphagia is difficulty swallowing. So now if they've had a stroke or something has impaired their ability to chew and swallow normally, they're going to place them on a dysphagia diet. A dysphagia 3 diet, so kind of reversed, is the least restrictive. And a dysphagia 3 says, you can pretty much have everything that I'm going to put on your plate. Whatever I'm preparing, if it's a hamburger, you can have it. If it's French fries, you can have it. But we're going to eliminate 2 categories, sticky and stringy. So I can't have celery, it's too stringy. I can't have sticky like peanut butter or thick honey. Those would be the things that are eliminated. Everything else will pretty much look according to what you would expect to see on the plate. If they need more restriction, they'll categorize you in a dysphagia 2 diet. A dysphagia 2 diet has the same restrictions of 3, but in addition, the pieces are 1/4-inch bite-sized pieces, and everything that is firm is basically cooked to mush. So if I like carrots, and I've got that in my veggie category, now the dietary department is going to overcook them so that the carrots are very soft and mushy. Well, what happens to the nutritional value of the carrots? It's gone. Yeah. It's why steaming vegetables became so popular, because we knew if we steamed them, We could soften them a little bit, but maintain their nutritional value. And now we're saying, oh yeah, you can have your carrots, but they're gonna be really soft and mushy. If you get to a dysphagia 1 category, which is the most restrictive, again, all of the restrictions of 3 and 2, but now basically everything that goes in your mouth goes in a blender first. So here comes your plate of breakfast. And there's a yellow glob right here. There's a cream colored glob right here. There's a tan glob right here. And a brown glob right there. All looking like somebody took baby food and put it on the plate. Now that's going to be a challenge for you to look at that and know what that is. So fortunately, there's a meal ticket that's on the tray, and it will tell you what's on there. So we have some scrambled eggs, we have some grits, we have a biscuit, and we have some bacon. And that's what that ended up being when you presented it to the resident. Now, it's disgusting. It looks bad, the texture's bad, there's nothing about those products that's going to taste good to them. But we still have to encourage them and say, oh, breakfast trays are here. Look what they made for you this morning. We've got scrambled eggs and grits, and we've got a biscuit and some bacon. What would you like to eat first? And we do our best to encourage them despite what that looks like. I mentioned to you on Friday when we were talking about measurements. We were focusing more on liquids, but on the solid component, you're kind of dividing the plate in quarter quadrants. And once they finish eating, you're going to have to document the percentage that they ate. So if they ate about a quarter of their plate, 25, about half, 50, 3/4, 75, and all of it, 100. And again, our goal is that we really want them, majority of the time, to be taking in about 75% of what's been presented. If they don't like the fruit cocktail, that's okay. They ate everything else, we're all right with that. So your goal is to get them to eat that. Now, in addition to the dysphagia 1 having the pureed food, it's likely that they will also have ordered something called thickened liquids. And thickened liquids is where they add a substance to your fluid, coffee, juice, anything you're drinking, to thicken the consistency. On the first day, I read you the story of Rachel, and she said that her fluids were only thickened to a nectar consistency, so she wasn't complaining too much about it. But she said some of the people at my table have to have their liquids so thick they are spoon-fed their liquids.
Some water?
This is water.
What?
So if you can imagine being thirsty and wanting to quench your thirst, and I say, oh, here, would you like some of this water? How appealing is that?
How do you thicken that?
It is thickened with Health Care Thickener. Kyle, will you bring me that canister, please, of the thickener?
Does it taste like anything?
No, it doesn't. Can you bring me that canister just a... No, it doesn't. It changes the texture. It does not change the taste. So it goes in everything. I mean, I could put it in her Pepsi if I needed to.
Is it like...
Yes.
Thank you very much.
My mother-in-law has that.
Yeah. And so not only this stuff doesn't quench your thirst, okay? It has no appealing taste to it. Now, in addition, you will feel more full and more satisfied if you eat this cup of water versus drinking water. And so then I have to balance out that I need them to have the moisture for hydration, but I also need them to have the calories for nutrition. And so how do I balance that? Yeah, Laura?
Why would you need to thicken their water?
You have to thicken anything that goes in their mouth. And the problem with it is most of the time it's people who have had a stroke. And when they had a stroke, basically half of the side of their mouth is numb or incapable of movement. And so if I put things with texture in them that are liquids, I have a better chance that they will be able to sense that it's in there and swallow, not breathe, because they know something's in their mouth. Whereas if I just give them a straw and have them try to suck up the liquid, they might not even sense that there's fluid in their mouth, and they could potentially breathe. and aspirate or choke on their fluid.
Doesn't it have to do with like their blood too? Because like when elderly people get older, their blood thins out.
There is a component where it will thin, but that usually is not why they're on that. It's almost always related to stroke or some condition, Bell's palsy, something that affected half of their mouth, basically. Or with some people with dementia or Alzheimer's, they're so confused. Yeah, they're so confused, they don't know when to swallow and when to breathe. And so if I have something that's more texture-like, they'll have a better chance of realizing something's in their mouth and not breathing. And then, of course, there can be things that are in between.
Does that make it have calories then?
No, it does not. It has no calories at all. And this is kind of in between. And I'll leave these up here that you guys can look at these on the break. Now, somebody said, what is it? What is it that they put in there? This is how it is purchased. I love this. It says, Instant Health Care Food Thickener. So you can imagine, since it's health care substance, the cost of this is going to be ridiculous. Let me read for you. Ingredients. Modified cornstarch. That's all that it is cornstarch. It's like thickening gravy at Thanksgiving. All this is cornstarch. So it's, again, a shame what we've done, but we've taken something and called it a healthcare product when it really has nothing to do with it. We're just thickening their liquids. So it's not pleasant. And so we get back to the idea that dietary mealtime is not appealing to them. I mentioned to you Barry on day 2, the gentleman who was paralyzed and ended up losing his leg from the bed sore. He loves pepperoni pizza. So you can imagine there's no way he's ever getting pepperoni pizza in the facility. So knowing that he's not on a diet restriction, what we will usually do on Friday is take him a pepperoni pizza. And you can do that if they're within their diet restriction, but you're going to see that they're just not satisfied with what's brought to them.
You said Barry was in his like late 40s, right?
Well, now he's probably about 55. He was in his late 40s when all this happened.
So
Yeah.
he didn't have any family members, because all he had was an amputee leg.
Right, that's correct.
was
He had
stuck
an elderly mother who couldn't help him. He had been in, excuse me. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Let me have Matthew call, okay? Thanks, bye. This is all the video. Hi, Vinny. Matthew, Christenberg can't see her supposedly till Wednesday. Can you make a quick call and see if you can make it happen before then?
Would we be responsible for thickening it, or does it come from the kitchen?
No, good question. It comes from the dietary department. This is going to be in the order. So their diet is going to read in the medical record, dysphagia 1 diet with thickened liquids. So you know that it's going to come out looking pureed with the thickened liquids. So you do not have to be responsible for that, because they also have to determine the level of thickness. Again, it can be ordered all the way through. Even on the instructions for the healthcare thickener, it even tells you how much to put to get the consistency. So if you want that nectar, which is the least thick, you know, there's a certain amount. If you want a pudding consistency, it tells you how much. So it will actually be ordered as to what consistency.
I know like in the hospital, the cafeteria will like bring it to them. Do we like bring them their food?
Yes.
Because I know in the hospital, if they had a restriction, they would come let us know and we would individually bring it to them.
Right, what they will do is they will bring out a tray cart that'll have like 50 trays on them. On the tray will already be their dietary order, whatever that is, with this meal ticket on it, with everything listed on it. Their fluids will already be pre-measured on that, and on the ticket it will say 8 ounces of coffee, 4 ounces of juice, 4 ounces of Ensure. And then you won't know the residents, obviously, so we'll make sure that you know who to take it to. We're probably going to intentionally give you feeders most of the time, because we want you to sit down and have that opportunity to go through the process of feeding them. What are the steps that I need to consider when I'm having to feed somebody? How do I handle the thickened liquids, the pureed food, and so forth? So the trays will be ready, thickened liquids, everything ready to go. The only thing that you potentially would have to do is open like a milk container, or on the tray will usually be a pack of jelly, a pack of salt, a pack of butter, pepper, mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, depending on what they're having. Those are all put on the side as condiments. And again, as a courtesy, ask them, what would you like? Because some people want butter on their grits and some people don't. And maybe you only eat grape jelly and they brought strawberry jelly. So be considerate of the fact that they have no control over the fact that this is the tray for this morning. So if I can give you any control at all, tell me what you want on your food items. And then in addition, ask them, what do you want to eat first? Because again, back to those habits. Maybe they like to do all of their eggs first. Then they want to eat their grits. Then they want to finish with their biscuit. And so you want to give them as much control as possible with that process. Now, there are some DHEC regulations and or violations when you're getting ready to feed and actually serve the food. First of all, make sure that you have the right patient, the right client. The name will be on the ticket. The room number will be on the ticket. Again, you won't know in clinical, so we'll help you, but if you're working in a facility on a long-term basis, you'll begin to know them. But if you ever aren't sure, you can ask them, tell me your name. Now, you don't want to ever say, is your name Chris? Because Chris might think that's a cool name and go, ah, yeah. And Chris now has the wrong tray. So you ask them to state their name if they're able to do that. Second thing with DHEC is they must be between a 45 and 90-degree angle when they're eating. So if they're in the bed, I have to raise the head of the bed to at least a 45-degree Fowler's. And then, of course, if they're sitting at the table, you're already at a 90-degree. You must offer them a clothing protector, but not require it. We don't call it bibs. It's like calling the brief a diaper. Bibs are for babies. So would you like a clothing protector put on to spare your beautiful shirt while you're eating? And if they say no, then they don't have to have one. We need to tell them what's on their tray. Okay, this morning we have eggs, grits, bacon, toast. Would you like salt or pepper? Would you like butter? What would you like first? And in addition to what would you like first, and they say, I want my eggs first, when you pick it up, you have to repeat it. Sounds kind of silly, but here are your eggs. It's just part of that interactive process. You're not going to see the staff doing that, but we're going to have you guys do that. We try not to rush them. We try to make sure their mouth is empty before we offer the next bite of food. But again, there's no guarantee that, time-wise, you're not going to feel like you're rushing them based on what we learned on the first day about the time management. But do your best to not rush them when they're doing it.
Do they all come to the dining hall, or some of them
Good
fit in
question.
their room?
Good question. There's going to be 2 dining areas. Well, I guess 3 if you count the room. One is called restorative dining, which means they can feed themselves. They might just need some help with setup, opening a carton, maybe cutting the food, and they will sit there and eat on their own. Then there's a room for feeders, where you will sit down and you'll actually feed them. And they can eat in their room if they just don't feel good, they don't want to get up. Not often, but they can eat in their room if they want to. Now, one of the other DHEC rules is when you get ready to feed somebody at a table, everyone sitting at the table must have their tray before you get started. Because again, you can imagine if I put a tray down here and I'm busy here feeding Shanika and Tammy's sitting there looking, if she's confused, she doesn't understand why she doesn't have a tray. And she's liable to even reach over and grab something off of her tray because she's probably hungry and ready to eat. So there are table assignments. And so the first round of trays that come out, everybody at table 2, the 4 of them, those 4 trays will be out at the same time. We'll get the 4 of them to the table together, and we'll make sure they're all eating at the same time. So again, it doesn't appear torturous to be waiting. Yes?
How is the food there?
It's horrible.
Is it-
Yes, it's horrible.
Even if
And they'll
it's-
tell you that.
Even if it's not pureed and it's.
Even if it's not
like-
pureed. It's
Really?
horrible. And in a lot of times, the patients that are more cognitively aware, we're trying to encourage them. Oh, this looks so good. Here, what would you like first? A bite of the pudding? And they'll go, you can have it. You go ahead if it looks that good. It's horrible. They'll tell you that it's disgusting.
So what would you do if you try your best to get them to eat and they're like mean to you and they
No,
don't want to
they won't do
eat?
it.
You just
2
don't-
things you're going to try. One, you're going to go get another staff member and see if maybe their interaction with that client is a little better than yours that day. There's no telling what they're thinking. They might not like the way your hair is that day, and they're not going to eat for you for anything. So you might say, hey, can you go over, Morgan, can you go over and help Miss Jones? She really is not eating for me. And maybe Morgan will sit down and Miss Jones will eat everything for her. If she won't, she's refusing, I'm not eating that, I've already told them, get it away from me, then you'll put the tray up and we will chart, instead of putting the percentage on the ticket of what they ate since they did not eat, we will put R. And R means they refused it. And they're obviously going to watch that, hoping that it was just one meal and not an ongoing process.
I know when I went through the course previously, we had to, when we went through this section, we actually ate like what they would eat. Are you gonna do that?
I won't make you do that. Yeah. When we do the feeding skill this afternoon, because there is a skill that you could draw for the state called feeding a resident who cannot feed themselves, we usually use M&Ms or something fun to practice with. But no, I'm not going to make you do it. It's disgusting. I mean, you know, if basically get some jars of baby food if you ever wonder. Or even take something at home and stick it in the blender. You know, stick that baked potato in the blender and have a little bit of milk and butter in it. And of course, that's not as bad as it's mashed potatoes. But you know, take corn and stick it in there and puree it. I mean, it's worse than cream corn or anything. It's not pleasant.
Do you supposed to wash your hands too if they're in their own rooms?
Yeah, you're always going to wash your hands. It goes back to the, yeah, there are typically wipes, you know, the typical bedside wipes, and you are to wipe their hands off to help them. Even if you're feeding them and they're not going to be touching the food, there's no guarantee that they won't reach up. So for that reason, you want to make sure their hands are clean. Back to just a minute where I was saying the table has to have the 4 people sitting at it that are all eating. You will see some CNAs trying to save time, and I get it, what they're trying to do, so they'll sit between 2 people, and they'll be here between Hattie and Chris, and they'll be doing this number, okay? Can't do that. Infection control, confusing the food, rushing them, not being able to pay attention to whether they've swallowed, choking risk. So it's a violation to do that. You're going to see it, but we're not going to do that. We'll give you a one-on-one assignment where you can sit down and face them and have some interaction. It's a great time to be able to interact with them.
If they refuse everything, do they get a second choice, or is it
No.
just no?
No, they get their next meal, lunch.
Oh.
Yeah. And the only people that are going to get snacks or some sort of extra dietary supplement are going to be those that are diabetic. And that's really based on making sure their blood sugars are maintained at a reasonable level. It's not because of anything more than that. Good point. Let me come back to that for just a second. On the diabetic, if you know your resident is a diabetic and they don't eat at least 75% of their food, that is the most important client to report to your charge nurse did not eat all of theirs. You know, there's going to be a lot of them that don't eat it, but the diabetic is typically on some sort of product, either it's insulin or oral agent, and with those medications, that is designed based on what they should be eating. And if they're not eating, they can plummet with their blood sugars and get in trouble. So those residents, and I'm pretty sure that question has been on the state test, which of the following residents should you report to your charge nurse that did not eat well? And it has like the resident with COPD, the resident with heart disease, the resident with diabetes, and then another answer, and it's the diabetic.
How do you know who is assigned what food? Just because you get used to the residents you have, so you'll recognize their faces?
Yeah, when you work at the facility, you'll begin to recognize, because you'll have an assignment. And if it's your day-to-day, you've got these 10 residents to take care of, you begin to learn them through orientation, it's a little bit easier. It's tough because in the long-term care facility, they do not have name bracelets on. So you're not going to be able to look at their name bracelet like you do at a hospital setting and see if that's who it is. They don't have identification on them. So asking them, asking another staff member if you're not sure, or just the fact of getting acquainted. Again, for clinical, we're literally going to hand you a tray and say, here, Kristen, this goes to Miss Barker, who's sitting right there. And you're not going to have to worry about it for clinical. And we're going to make sure that you know who to work with.
What if their medicine is supposed to be taken with meals and they eat nothing?
Okay, so the medication nurse or the med tech will have time intervals to give the food. The thing that they get away with that, like with this, take with meals, is most of the medications are crushed and put into like an applesauce or a pudding to make it easier for them to swallow, and so they don't pocket their pills. And so because of that, it's considered a substance going into their stomach with the medication, so they get by with it. Yeah. So that's kind of how they get away with it. All right, some of the other terms I want to make sure you guys are familiar with. You may, we said dysphagia 3, 2, and 1. Here's another abbreviation to know, which is NPO. It stands for nothing by mouth. It's only really gonna be 2 scenarios in long-term care where you would have somebody nothing by mouth. One would be the individual with a feeding tube. They have a feeding tube sewn into their belly, it is because they are not to have anything oral anymore. The second individual might be that resident who's having a test or a lab procedure or something scheduled. So they'll put a sign on the door that says NPO after midnight. And again, you just need to follow that. They're not going to get that. Another abbreviation you might see is NAS. And again, these are in your ring binder for you. But NAS means that they are not have any added salt or sodium. Your 2 types of residents that are typically on a no added sodium are my kidney disease, renal disease, dialysis type patients, because their kidneys cannot eliminate the waste. And then our patients with congestive heart failure, same reason, their body can't assimilate fluid, sodium retains fluid, and so they end up putting them on a no added salt. Another one you may see is LCS, low concentrated sugars. That is obviously going to be your diabetic. And you also may see, in addition to that, behind their caloric order, you may see ADA. So you may see that Miss Jones is on a 1,600 calorie ADA diet, which is American Diabetic Association. So just kind of as an indicator to you that they are a diabetic. So look for those types of abbreviations on the order. If they are underweight or they're somewhat malnourished, the most common thing you're going to see is those protein shakes, like the Ensures or little cartons. Those are high protein, high calorie. And we never want them to be a substitute, but they definitely can be added and encouraged. And if you have a choice between letting them finish their cup of coffee and letting them finish their chocolate Ensure shake or strawberry shake, really get them more to focus on the Ensure, because you're giving them the calories and the protein more so than just the pleasure of having the coffee. And again, just keep in mind, some of these people are pretty angry when they've had coffee every morning for breakfast for 70 years and they don't get coffee. Or they've had sweet tea with dinner every meal for their entire life and there's no longer any sweet tea. So it's not a pleasant experience for them necessarily at mealtime. And you'll see that most of them aren't happy campers when you would think that the food would come out and they'd be all excited about it, that they're not. All right, in your ring binder, I've just put a little handout on some water facts. In addition to their meals, each resident will have a water pitcher at their bedside. It's going to be our responsibility at the end of our clinical rotation to fill that water pitcher with fresh ice water and put it, on their bedside table. The reason being is if they cannot hydrate themselves, they can't reach for it. Again, we used Clarence's example last week where his arms have these contractures. If he can't do that, then the best way to ensure that somebody's going to be giving him fluid is if I have it right there all the time. When I go to turn him, when I go to change his breathe, when I just go to check on him, then it's right there for me to say, hey, while I'm here, why don't you take a couple swallows of water? Because it's critical that these folks not get dehydrated. And it's sad because there is this, again, mentality from some of the CNAs that if you don't give them water, then they won't wet their brief, and then I can go 3 to 4 hours without brief changes, and it makes my job easier. And I get the frustration they have with the time to get it done, but that is absolutely abuse. Not just neglect, that's abuse, to withhold fluids from a resident to avoid that. We had a situation in clinical where we were in the feeding area, and we had, Miss Sullivan was eating, and I had a male CNA resident that was taking care of her, and she had finished her lunch, and she was still thirsty, and she had finished all her fluid. And so my CNA said, well, would you like for me to get you a little more water? And she was like, oh, that'd be wonderful. So she went and got some water and started walking towards Miss Sullivan, and I wish I had this on video, but there was a CNA that worked there from across the room and said, water boy, I don't think so. You're not going to be here this afternoon to change that. Across the dining room. And I thought, you're going to be kidding me. And I said, no problem, we'll make sure she's changed before we leave. But, that really is some of that thought process of, I'm not going to have time to do all that, so don't give her the extra water. What she had out on her plate was enough, it's adequate, don't give her anything extra. but we don't want to take that approach at all.
What if, they have to have the water thickener?
Yeah, if they have to have the thickener, if you go get something extra, you do need to go to dietary department and ask them about it, and that does make it harder. But I will tell you that those on thickened liquids are usually not the ones asking for extra fluids, because one, it doesn't taste good, but second, they're already full. I mean, again, if you can imagine, this is 6 ounces of water, but if you had all of this right now, it would take your whole appetite away even for lunchtime. You know, it's disgusting, but it is what it is. Magnolia still has some paper charting, so I put this in your book for you as well. We are trying to get to electronic charting, and some of it is done that way, but there is still paper charting. It's going to be funny when you guys take the tour at the nurses' station. They still have the old-timey rack with the charts, those green ringed binder type charts stacked in there by room numbers for the doctors to come write orders. And in there will be a form like this. This is a monthly dietary record. And so it has on it the days of the month, 1 through 31, depending on what month it is. At the top, it's the month and the year. And then it basically has breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And this is where you would put the percentage, 25, 50, 75, or 100, and then the amount of cc's or milliliters that they drank in those boxes. At the bottom, you've got your initials, so you put your initials and sign, and then that way when you initial it, each time, you don't have to sign every entry. So if I worked the first, second, and third, as long as KC was at the bottom here with my signature under 1, 2, and 3 initials, I can just put KC. And from a medical legal standpoint, that is going to represent what was on the chart. And again, you'll see that this particular form from Magnolia, they use a coding system. Those boxes are pretty small, so you'll see that 1 equals 100%, 2 equals 75, so you don't even have to use the percent sign. Okay, you can just use the number and they'll know what that's equated to. And so, again, R is for refusal, very important. If it's not charted, it's not done. So if DHEC comes around to make rounds and they say, let me see your entry for Miss Jones for the month of January, which they can do. And if I pull this out and I hand it to them and there is any empty box, it means you did not offer them food or fluid at that mealtime. You have to put something. Not written is not done. So if they refused it, put the R. If they took it, put the amount in there. But you cannot leave it blank, so just be careful. Again, for us, for clinical, because they don't want us in the medical record itself, we'll put everything on that ticket, and we'll put the ticket in a basket at the nurse's station, and then they've agreed to enter all of that in the medical record for us at the end of the shift. So that'll make it a little bit easier for you guys, okay? So that's what you have on your handout. All right, any questions about feeding nutritional issues?
I have a question about
Yeah.
the meal record.
Okay,
So what if you're assigned the same group and you come and you see that you forgot to do it for yesterday? Is that considering falsifying information if you do an estimate or?
okay, I'm glad you just brought that up. You will find that, again, for the CNAs to save time, they will typically go through after breakfast and just chart everybody. And many times they'll go ahead and chart lunch on everybody after breakfast. Because they've had these people, they've worked there for a year, they know what the residents typically do, they know they usually eat 75%. Who cares if I put 75 and it's 50 today? Or I put 25 and it's 50 today? And so they will falsify by pre-documenting the information. If you forgot, post-documenting is not a problem, but the approved abbreviation is LE, which means late entry, which means you just put it in not at the time that they ate. Okay, but you'll see way more pre-charting to save time than you will going back and fixing it. And again, in fact, and it's not to throw Magnolia under the carpet or under the bus, but when they know DHEC's coming, they'll actually pull everybody's meal record, and then we'll have a team, a QA team, that'll go through it and make sure nothing's blank, and they are filling it in because they don't want to be cited for that. We had an incident where Miss Worley was on hospice, very, very sick, and the CNA had charted her breakfast and went ahead and charted her lunch, and she died at like 10:30 or 11 o'clock that day. So lunch was charted, and she had passed before lunch. You say, well, man, I bet she got fired. Well, again, we learned the first day, there's not a whole lot of people watching. It was very easy to say, oh my gosh, I didn't need to put that on that record. That was a mistake in the wrong box. line through it, put your initials, it becomes just an error in charting, not the fact that you truly falsified the document. So again, it's really even hard to catch them at that because it's too easy to hide it. But yes, you can do a late entry, you'll just mark that it's late entry. Good question. Any other questions that you guys have about dietary? Again, most of these chapters are pretty short. All right, let's, yes.
I do.
Yes.
The 5 special diets, is it the ones in bold or is it the NPO, NAS, LCS?
Okay, special diets are going to be your dysphagia 3,
Right.
dysphagia 2, and dysphagia 1. You can include regular diet because that means you don't have any of those restrictions. And then you also can include somebody that's just on liquids because you may have people that for periods of time that are on liquids only, particularly if they have digestive disorders. And so that would be a form of a diet that you could use. And I think,
Like LCS?
no, just liquid diet, yeah. LCS well, I mean, you could, I guess you could use that one too. You could use a diet that involves no added salt or a diet that involves low concentrated sugars. Okay, yeah, you can use any of those. Okay, let's get our skills book out.